Transformers Age of the Primes so far has been an interesting toy line to say the least. We have gotten some killer releases like Megatronus the Fallen, G1 Silverbolt, Armada Flatline, and Cybertron Sideways. Then there are a couple of oddballs like Micronus Prime and an obvious copyright infringement avoidance or two, and then there's Amalgamus. Enter the latest wave of Age of the Primes with figures like Prime Universe Cliffjumper and Smokescreen, G1 Power Glide, a badass Liege Maximo, and Transformers 1 Nexus Prime. When the first images were revealed, I was pretty underwhelmed by Nexus being based off of his Transformers 1 design over the one we've seen on the box art for Age of the Primes. However, thanks to MGO316, I was convinced to give Nexus Prime a fair go, and with all the drama surrounding every single new release, I have come to make a statement. Maybe let's wait until reviews come out to put our judgment on a release, because judging by the terrible promotional pictures Hasbro always provides, they never do a figure justice. With all that said, let's dive right in. As I have already said, Nexus Prime takes major cues from his design in Transformers 1, a fantastic movie with a weirdly okay Nexus Prime design. Although as time went on up until when I picked this guy up, I have warmed up to it a lot for reasons I will get to later on. As for the actual paint and sculpt work on Nexus here, there's really not much to talk about. He does have a rather generic design with a nice gas mask head, but apart from that, he really doesn't have much else going for him so far. When you have designs like that of Onyx, Quintus, and Amalgamus Prime, Nexus really doesn't scream Prime. Yet, anyway. I think the main thing that drew me away at first, besides him not being my personal favorite design for the character, was the color choice. If Nexus had a color scheme similar to that of his appearance in Transformers 1, I think I would have been more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in the beginning. On the topic of paint, I really do like these little bits of gold and silver scattered around, which adds at least some visual interest and helps him not totally look like a bootleg. Before we move along, I will mention that Nexus does have quite a backpack, although this thankfully serves a purpose later down the road. The only thing I do wish is that the nose cone could collapse a little further in, and if it could also peg in a little better. Super cruising along, Nexus Prime comes with two wing blasters, which can plug into his hands via 5mm port and slot, which looks really good in my opinion. The wings are also on hinges, so you can display them however you like. Of course, because he is the first combiner in Transformers lore, he comes with the Enigma of Combination with some lush silver and gold paint with a symbol really nicely painted in the gold centerpiece. And of course, Nexus Prime can hold it in his hand. I do wish that he could wield this like Prima would the Matrix of Leadership, which does bug me a little bit, but it's not a deal breaker. Now, if you wanted to store all of his bits and bobs, you can peg the Enigma combination on the underside of the nose cone, and the wing blasters can peg onto his back, which really does help to complete the silhouette. One thing about Nexus in the future that I do wonder about is, since they are releasing Limbots for him next year, who's going to come with a combiner skeleton? Because Nexus doesn't have one. The one way I can see them accomplishing this in a standalone release is bumping him up to Commander class. However, we already have Onslaught and the upcoming Armada Jetfire up there. Not to mention with how stupid expensive everything is getting, I think people would be even less willing to lay down $100 for this, regardless if it comes with a skeleton. Now let's take a brief moment before Nexus Prime's next yoga session, because I want to point out an issue or two with my copy. For the most part, I don't have too many grievances about him, but the main thing I take issue with is that some of his joints are a bit too loose, in particular the lateral range in his left hip and his right shoulder rotation. Apart from that, everything else is pretty solid. Hell, even the backpack holds in okay, but that's probably just the detented joints talking. Yes, I definitely would have complained about this not matching the box art back then, but nowadays that's basically a non-issue for me because of what we'll get into real soon. But for now, let's take a look at Nexus Prime in motion. Nexus Prime is a ball joint at the head with a rather expressive range of motion. The arms are on universal joints so they can rotate and move out, swivel at the bicep. The elbow bends at about 90, going either direction. The wrist swivel is unfortunately very limited and hard to access due to the sculpt. Waist swivel, the legs are on universal joints much like the shoulders. Thigh swivel, 90 degrees at the knee. Lastly, the feet have several hinge joints due to transformation, but for the sake of ending this segment, the feet can move down and tilt. Now that class is over, let's do a quick round of robot mode size comparisons with the Figma Hamura Akemi, Figma Jean d'Arc, SH Monster Arts Bio Goji, MPM Barricade, New Age Mista, my last review the Age of the Primes aerial bots, Prime Changers Alpha Trion, Age of the Prime Tonic Cronus, Alchemist, Quintus, Solus, Amalgamus, Prima, Onyx, and Megatronus. Much like my review on the aerial bots, I'm not going to provide a tutorial in this video. However, I will link a separate transformation video on how to transform Nexus Prime. So with that out of the way, what the f is this jet mode? I think MGO put it best because it's a literal brick with wings. This has to be one of the least aerodynamic alt modes I have ever seen. Of course, you can tell this alt mode is not a priority. This thing is just so freaking goofy and I love it. Thankfully though, the figure doesn't actively try to disintegrate while you transform it, so take that, Amalgamus! Much like in robot mode, you can store the Enigma of Combination underneath the nose cone, and honestly, I think I kind of prefer it that way. Now, call this the biggest coincidence in history, but I just noticed that Nexus also has a droop snoot. And what other Transformer do we know has a droop snoot? You see where I'm getting at here? Not important to anything and probably not intentional. I just think it's hilarious. As for jet mode comparisons, I cannot be bothered to transform the rest of the primes because Lord knows that'll probably take 25 years. So instead, here's Quintus Prime, Cybertron Sideways, and the aerial bots. Now you'd think this is where I'd end the review, right? Well, despite this mode being where the instructions end, we're not done here just yet. This is where Nexus Prime gets really good. The play features. First of all, according to MGO, Nexus can apparently hook up to Silverbolt's space travel gear, but I can't be bothered to figure it out again, so here's a picture. Once again, the transformation tutorial is linked down below, but once it's all said and done, some of y'all might be asking yourselves, what the is this piece of shit? It may look like a pile of junk with a big head on top of it at first, but if we bring in Superion and do a little switcheroo, remind me again why this isn't in the instructions, because holy shit! This is where I really started to fall in love with the figure. I adore that Nexus Prime is cross-compatible with other combiner skeletons, not just Silverbolt, mind you. Apparently he's also compatible with Legacy Menastor, as well as the upcoming Age of the Primes Bruticus. Another nice thing about this is that you can also display him facing either direction you want, depending on your preference. Either you can have the combiner chest or the Enigma of Combination facing forward, and honestly, I really like both. Not to mention, you can also use Nexus Prime's wing blasters to form shoulder cannons for the combiner, to which I say, hell yeah! Sure, one could complain about these gaps in the chest, but in actuality, it's quite an easy fix because you can always cover them up, or you can display it facing the other way. Another thing, can I just talk about how friggin' cool that combined mode head is? Are you kidding me? That's friggin' rad! One thing I did forget to mention in robot mode is how weighty Nexus feels in hand, and honestly, comparing his weight to Silverbolt, they honestly don't feel too far off from each other. This definitely has me curious about how the official Nexus Maximus is gonna look, but for now, just having him alongside the aerial bots, I am a happy f***ing guy. Sadly though, all good things must come to an end, so let's take a look at Nexus Prime's packaging. It's officially time to wrap things up with my thoughts on the Age of the Prime's Nexus Prime. This guy is plain and simple fun. Sure, he is generic on the surface, but once you introduce the play value, not to mention the cross-compatibility, I think Nexus Prime is my favorite Voyager class Prime and definitely top 3 favorites for me. Prima was decent, though he was very plain and amalgamous. Oof, that's a whole nother story I need to cover at some point. Nexus isn't going to be for everybody, but if you do own Menasor, Silverbolt, or eventually end up getting Onslaught, then that's where the play value of this guy reaches its peak, and frankly, with all that being said, I am pleased with adding Nexus to my dynasty of the Primes. Now let's answer the question of where this gem can be found and its price. I found him at my local Target for what used to be regular retail price, being $35 for a Voyager, not even on clearance by the way. It was just like that, and he was brand new there. That pill I can swallow way easier than ordering him on Amazon for nearly $10 more. Do I recommend him though? Honestly, I would only recommend him either if you're a completionist for the 13 or if you have Onslaught, Silverbolt, or Motormaster, because that's when you can fully enjoy the experience with this figure. My enjoyment for this may very well because I own Silverbolt, but still, I think Nexus Prime altogether is, as I previously said, plain and simple fun. So that officially concludes my review on the Transformers Age of the Primes, the 13 Nexus Prime, and as always, I will see you all in my next video. Peace out!